Hi, my name's Dr Adam Booth and welcome to another locked down edition of Quantum Source. Now, the big piece of advice for this particular source is wrap up warm, because we are headed not to the back of my spare room, but here to Antarctica. And there's a couple of reasons that we wanted to do an Antarctic Quantum Source. Number one, 2020 marks the 200th anniversary of the first sighting of Antarctica by Russian explorers. And that really launched a golden age of Antarctic exploration and eventually international collaboration over the future of Antarctica. And obviously that collaboration really comes into its own when the whole world is potentially affected by the potential sea level contribution from the ice of Antarctica in the face of global climate warming. The second reason, and a little bit closer to the lockdown conditions that we find ourselves in, if there's any one group of scientists who knows a thing or two about the harsh realities of working in a lockdown and under extreme social isolation, then it's the scientists who work in Antarctica, where they spend most of their field season hunkered down in a tent while the full fury of an Antarctic gale howls around them. So, a bit of a tribute to those scientists. And so our guest speaker today is Dr Alex Burton-Johnson, who's a field geologist with the British Antarctic Survey, and he's going to be telling us a bit about his research and I think showing us some really cool footage of the Antarctic continent. But before we give Alex a call, we've got our recommended source. We always said at Quantum Source that fascinating facts are best served with something refreshing, and so today's recommendation, there can only be one really, and that's this Shackleton Whiskey. So Shackleton was something of a hero of the polar exploration era. He had a disastrous expedition, but through his own sort of grit and ingenuity, he was able to rescue and save all of his crew. And it was a really heroic effort. But this particular whiskey is named after him because it's based on whiskey that was found, I think in 2011, at Shackleton's base camp that was part of the supplies that were given to him to go down there. So this is a taste of the refreshing sauces that were served up in the golden age of polar exploration. So I'm going to enjoy a wee dram, and you get yourself something nice. We'll give Alex a call. Cheers. And there's Alex with his rock. All right, mate, how you doing?
Oh, hello.
Slick. How you doing?
Yeah, right, toddling along in this this new world.
Absolutely, but of course you know a thing or two about that as a field scientist, right?
Yeah, this is the funny thing. So since the start, people are saying, "Oh, Antarctic scientist, you must have spent a lot of time in lockdown, pretty much training." I had to explain to people like a big difference is that when you're out in Antarctica, you know you might be stuck in the middle of nowhere, one person in a tent.
Yeah.
But in 3 months' time, even if things are going well, if they're going bad, a plane will turn up and it will pick you up and it will take you out of there. And it's just this uncertainty. No one knows where this is going, how long it will last for, and yeah, that is totally different. This is
right.
This is
no finality to it versus like there's an actual end point for what you're doing.
Oh yeah, this is very different. Plus, we're out in Antarctica having adventures.
Absolutely, yeah.
My first ascents in this house aren't quite the same.
Yeah, and I imagine you've got better central heating than what you would have in your tent.
Yeah. I hope so.
So, when you are in your tent in Antarctica, what sauce are you craving?
Ooh, so the big one. So we actually have drop-offs every now and then.
Yeah.
Where a plane will come in, and normally once a season, people will come through, and you'll get a resupply of food. And if you're lucky, they'll leave some beers, which is always nice. A treat because whilst you might be able to take some whiskey down there, this stuff freezes.
Yeah. Right. Well, cheers. Enjoy it while you can.
I also brought along. Given this is Quantum Source, and I'm definitely Southern. Here's a lovely little gem that I found since moving up here. I just hope you guys have seen this before.
So you've become strong and north with some Hendersons.
Very proud of this in Sheffield.
Nice.
And, strong and northern branded across the front. I don't know what the Southern equivalent is of that.
Yeah, gentle and Southern or something like that. Nice one. Right. So I promised that there would be a virtual Antarctic trip. So can you take us there?
Yeah, so I thought give you a little talk,
Nice.
show what we do, what's my job as a geologist for the Antarctic Survey, talk about what work we're doing, why we do it, and then move on to something a bit more fun, take you on a field trip, show you through one of my land-based field seasons, show some pretty pictures and some stories.
Cool. Let's go for it.
Brilliant. Okay, so I thought I'd open, as the title I like to use in these talks, isn't Antarctica just made of ice? Is probably the second most common question I get when I say what I do as a geologist working in Antarctica, after the "have you seen any polar bears" question.
Yeah, I'm sure the Quantum Source audience will write in and say exactly why that's not a good question to ask.
So, so I said before, I was going to talk through what are our aims, what do we do, and then some pretty pictures and stories on how we get those sweet, sweet rocks. So what are we up to? I think it's important to open, we're not a university, we're a government research institute, so we're slightly different in that our work kind of falls into two core aims. One is what we call national capability, long-term monitoring and surveying. And this is kind of providing a broader service of collecting data down there and disseminating that data and working closely with Foreign and Commonwealth Office where it's appropriate, or working with, for instance, the biologists, conduct research monitoring the populations of the fishes and the krill offshore. And we provide our mapping and geological data for broader use. And on top of that is more like you'd see for a university, so academic research and publication. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap between these two, and that'll be very apparent when I show you what we've been up to. This is always very important. Why do we do it, and what justifies it? So I was having a mull on this, but the real core areas, you've got your specialist impact, working as a geologist, looking at how our findings will inform on the global geological processes. You've got the much broader impact. These days we look at all of natural sciences about understanding the Earth system. It used to be that we'd siloed, you'd have your biologists working in one area, the geologists in another. And we've come to understand that that's really not the way forward. So as a geologist, we look at how our research feeds into the broader system. People might be interested in tracing sediments. They need to know where those sediments came from initially. They may need to know where the nutrients that their fish are feeding off are coming from. Or they may just need to know what's there, and how did it get there? How did this fit into things on the long time scales that geologists like to deal with? Remembering that when a geologist says 1 million years, that's pretty recent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this is something that's often avoided. I think it's because it's a bit harder. When we see science in the media, it's normally told as A to B. Scientists wanted this thing and they went out and they got it. And actually, in practicality, exploration, be it geographically going to new places with new equipment or scientifically looking into new areas, people shy away from a bit. And this is a shame, because this is core really to how most science works. And it's what leads to a lot of our unanticipated breakthroughs. The classic one that Antarctic Survey likes to wheel out, because it's probably their biggest and most important finding, was the discovery of the hole in the ozone layer.
Yeah.
And which famously wasn't what they were looking for. They were monitoring ozone layer levels around the world, and they set up some sensors in Antarctica and found a bit of a gap. And whilst we're not saying we'd be doing that in geology, if people aren't going out and pushing new areas and new ideas, especially in somewhere, you've got a whole continent down there with so little known about it. Pieces of work that would have been done anywhere else in the world decades ago still haven't been done. So the scope for exploration, I think, is definitely not something to shy away from. It's very core, and we never know what we're going to find when you've got this much land and this much sea still to work with. So yeah, what is worth noting, and it's a funny little detail because everyone has to be aware of it, but you train not to let it work too much of its way into your work, is we are a government and political organisation. So for people who don't know, various countries stated claims on parts of Antarctica, and these have all been suspended since the Antarctic Treaty was developed. But governments of these respective countries still focus their research in these areas. to maintain political and environmental influence. So the British Antarctic Territory is this little splice in red. So whilst the Antarctic Survey and its scientists work all over the continent, our bases are all focused in this area, and this is the dominant area of our research. Obviously, things were a bit more interesting prior to the treaty with these other claims.
Yeah.
Popular spot. Although this bit, I don't know what was wrong with here. What was wrong with Harry Birdland? If anyone wants it, it's still sitting down there.
Right. Who do you have to write to claim it then?
I don't know. Can we just turn up on a boat and dump some flags?
Yeah. We'll design our own flag and go for it.
But yeah, I mean, this is a huge area. Antarctica is an absolutely massive continent, much bigger than Europe. And that area we're looking at, there are 2 hard rock geologists in Bass, and we get to work on all of the geology of that wedge. So as you'll see, we're not super specialised in what we do. There's an awful lot of things that can be done in this place. So I'm going to whittle through the areas that we work in this non-specialist style. So the core question, and this feeds into most geology really, is what's there, how did it get there? And this is the broad data that we feed into this national capability side. This is geological mapping and tectonic understanding. So applying all of the different fields of geology to understanding what we see in the field. Why does one rock relate to another? How does this feature relate to this feature? And how do we go growing a continent? How do we end up with it? And how does it fit into the whole global system? Remembering that these continents have moved around the planet. The Antarctic Peninsula was once sandwiched alongside South America and South Africa. So this is our big question. What's there? How did it get there? This isn't just done on land. So I've also worked at sea a couple of times, where we take geophysical surveying of the seafloor to produce maps like that on the right.
That's kind of like echo sounding or something like that.
Exactly.
Right.
And these ships were just passing backwards and forwards. There's a big international initiative around the world to map the world's oceans, feeding lower resolution satellite data with higher resolution ship data. And it's amazing what you can find just from the shape of things. There's a whole field of geomorphology looking at how these features on the seafloor can tell you about their development. And we also, I always assumed it would be a more higher tech method, but you can sample the seafloor by very expensive methods, by drilling cores, and there's an international initiative that does this, or by chucking a big metal bucket off the back of the ship and dragging it along.
The budget option.
Which is what we were doing in the top left. So we wanted to map the sea floor in this area. This is the sea separating South America and Antarctica. And there's big features. So say we're doing these surveys and we're seeing these big features on the sea floor, like huge rises the size of the Alps, but we have no idea what they are, where they came from, why they're there. So we went over, chucked a bucket off the back, dragged it along, and then sifted through the rocks, trying to work out what was from there and what had been drifted by these icebergs. So something I didn't realise is an iceberg, because the Southern Ocean goes all the way around Antarctica, an iceberg can leave Antarctica and it can travel for years, dropping rocks all the way around.
Oh, so kind of like rocks that have been frozen into the bottom of the iceberg just get sort of dropped out.
Exactly.
Right.
And that makes things quite tricky. Bear in mind, when you work on geology anywhere else, you go out of your way to make sure the rock that you're hitting is the rock that's in the ground and not just a pebble that's rolled down. If you've been told that an iceberg has travelled all the way around from the other side of Antarctica, and it's also been doing the same thing, things become a bit more tricky.
Yeah, right.
But all fun and games. Briefly, this is kind of my largest field of geological research, is the understanding of how tectonic processes, that is the moving of the continents, and magmatism relate. So here's a classic textbook example of the idea that ocean crust grows in the oceans and migrates and subducts beneath the continents. And the Antarctic Peninsula is an evidence of one of these edges of a continent. Whilst I'm sure plenty of interesting geological stuff happens in the middle of continents, by far the most, and we're all aware of this with famous phrases like the Pacific Ring of Fire, happening along these margins, is this loss of the ocean crust that as it dehydrates, as it heats up and it dries out, all of that water and melted rock drives all of the big processes of continental growth, magmatism, sedimentation, and tectonics along the margins. And the Antarctic Peninsula is one of these. It's 2,000 kilometers of of continental margin, and it's a key part of our role to understand how it grew and how the way that it grew tells us about the rest of our planet.
Oh, so you can use it as an analogue for, say, the Pacific Ring of Fire or something.
Exactly, because it's part of this. So whilst we have a huge amount of our understanding about how continents grow, how these regions develop, has been developed from actually very local areas. So an awful lot is known, for instance, about parts of Western USA, parts of Chile, parts of Southeast China. But it's very easy in science to get biased towards your study area. What we have here is a margin which is actually reasonably simple, and that is history. It grew, it rifted, and it died. And we can look at these processes there, and we can test what we see against what people have seen elsewhere, and see what does work and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much a laboratory for that.
Yeah, cool.
Like I say, this is that I strayed into, actually via chatting to some people at a bar at a conference.
when we could, way back when.
when we could enjoy the sauce. And this is fascinating. So I say it's very important these days that we don't look at any field of science, in my case geology, as its own little silo. We have to look at the Earth system as a whole. And whilst it may seem quite counterintuitive that rocks are warm, through radioactive decay, they produce enough heat that when you are beneath the thickest ice of the East Antarctic ice sheet, where it isn't very little frictional heat, the heat from the mantle and the Earth's crust can decide whether the bottom of this ice melts and whether it's able to flow.
Okay.
And so when you have these ice sheet modelers trying to work out how the ice sheet flows now and how it will flow and contribute to sea level change as the climate develops, they need to understand this parameter. It's very important to know what can and what won't flow. However, whilst anywhere else on the planet we drill holes in the crust and we measure how hot it was, the big 3-kilometer ice sheet has hindered that.
Yeah, right. There's a bit of an obstacle there.
Bit of an obstacle.
Right.
So this is a field I've strayed into, working with geophysicists, glaciologists, and geologists and geochemists to try and work out how we can best constrain this and communicate this information to those that model ice sheet flow.
Right.
This is something as well. When I started at BAS, a big challenge with working in Antarctica is the time scales you're dealing with to acquire rocks. If you work anywhere else, you can get on a flight, go and work on some rocks. Well, normally.
Yeah, right.
Flight and go and get some rocks in the Alps.
The obstacle here is get on a flight.
No, sorry guys.
Not going.
Don't want to break it to you. But typically, it's reasonably easy to go out and collect your samples. If you're working in Antarctica, you've got this lag time of preparing your field season, getting to the field, collecting your rocks, and then waiting for a ship to bring them all the way back before you can even start looking at them. So you fill your time with other projects. And something I've strayed into is how do we look at those rocks without actually going there? We have all of these satellite platforms collecting better and better data. The first piece I did to a geologist, when you're making a map, first thing you need to know is where the rocks even are. So I had a fun and games trying to work out how best to map rock outcrop across the continent, which was fun. I just wanted to have a base map, but what allowed for the first time was to actually estimate how much of Antarctica wasn't covered in ice.
Right.
And that little number of 0.18% actually got picked up by a few different media organisations, which, whilst I'm always surprised that geology isn't in the media every day, why don't they plot my geochemical plots on the front of the BBC?
I mean, but with numbers like 0.18%, mate.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, that was good fun. We've also tried to move a little bit beyond this, see if we can use infrared data to discern actual rock types. And this was something fun. This did get picked up by quite a bit of media interest.
Right.
There was evidence for a thermal anomaly on a little island There's this island arc out here in the southern Atlantic, and it's one of the most active volcanic arcs in the world, and probably one of the least explored places that isn't beneath the sea on the planet. And we reinvestigated this thermal anomaly with modern satellite data, and we discovered this, that it's a lava lake. We were able to map its size, measure its temperature from space. And this is fascinating because whilst we all intuitively picture volcanoes as these bubbling pools of lava on top mountains, this is only the fifth one presently active in the world. There were 3 others last year that turned off after eruptions. So this is actually incredibly scarce. Most volcanoes sit there not doing anything, a big quiet mountain, they erupt, and then that's the end of it. So this is quite an anomaly, and hopefully we'll be able to mount some expedition there to go and find out why. Why is this thing?
Can I ask what might be a really dumb question? So we had a talk about remote sensing and kind of satellite technologies a few quantum sources ago, and Peter Shaw, the speaker there, was talking about sort of false colour images. Is that a false colour image that you can see, or are you really saying that the little red blob you can see in the middle of the volcano, is that the lava, or is that sort of a thermal representation of it? So
that is a false colour image, and what you've got there are 2. So a false colour image, you're taking your 3 RGB bands for your image on the screen, and 2 of those are from RGB, and then the other is shortwave infrared.
Okay.
And that addition of shortwave infrared, rather than the 3rd RGB band, is what picks out the thermal anomaly.
Right. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, good spot. That's why it looks kind of weird.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, can you really see the lava from space? But no, it's just the heat signature of the lava.
Yeah, it's just the heat signature. But it's a grand way of quickly scanning over data to see if you've got any thermal anomalies before you interrogate the data further.
Yeah, totally. That's cool.
Plus, it looks really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this isn't actually a field that I work in myself, but they say the 2 hard rock geologists, 2 geophysicists looking at the rocks of Antarctica, and they help us with the bits that don't stick out of the ice. So they have their little plane, they're able to collect magnetics, radar, and gravity data over the ice sheet. And they use this as kind of a proxy, whilst these features obviously are not the rocks on their own. Different rocks have different signatures in their gravitation or their magnetics, and the ice sheet and its topography can be detected through the radar. And so they can look at, working with them, we can look at what we find in the rocks that stick out and what we understand from the longer term history, and they can compare this with the signatures they see in their geophysicists' data, and we can try and interpret between the very large gaps. Again, ice sheet giving us little challenges.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, that's why we do it, and all of the different things that we do. I thought it'd be fun to take you on a field trip.
Awesome.
So this is a season from a couple of years ago, working on the southeast of the Antarctic Peninsula. I always find it funny in these photos. This was taken, so you're working in a team of 2, as you'll see later. Just these photos of me just staring at rocks and clearly ignoring the stunning view behind them.
You're getting very up close and personal with those sweet, sweet rocks, it has to be said.
It is looking a bit odd. Give it some space. Oh man. So yeah, this is the spot. This is Antarctic Peninsula. So we were interested here. There was evidence from some work. This massive area. We're working between me and my boss. We're working over about a couple 100 kilometres. Had only been mapped very low level back in the 70s by a small American team. So most of the mountains, this is a big area of Antarctic mountains, most of them hadn't been mapped or visited. But the evidence that we had to start with implied something was very big. And in agreement with their data, what we found here is that 100 million years, we have probably the largest magmatic event on the Antarctic Peninsula, and we needed to work out why did this happen. There was this very distinct pulse. It was a pulse at a similar time to what had happened elsewhere on the planet. As I said previously, it's important to look at how what we have in Antarctica compares in what you have elsewhere around the Pacific. And so, the question here, the kind of national capability question, what's there? Job for radar mapping in an area that no one's been before, and work out how it got there and how that fits into the broader system. And the academic question, when we've got this massive piece and clearly a discrete event, well, how can this tell us about fundamental association between the two biggest areas of geology, tectonics and magnetism?
That's the movement of the plates and the kind of volcanic eruptions that go with them.
Exactly. So how you've got the biggest concept, which is that your continents are moving around relative to each other, growing in places and being destroyed in others. And it's in this area. If you've got this huge pulse of magnetism, that's a huge amount of new rock that's been added to your crust. You've grown a continent effectively. Why? And is this how it's happened everywhere? Is this a common feature? Is this how our continents have grown? And obviously, we're quite grateful that we have continents to stand on. They provide us with our land. They provide us with all our precious metals. And they're unique in that we are the only planet we know of with two types of crust, with continental crust and oceanic crust.
Okay.
So these are quite. This is a fundamental process, and having such a discrete and distinct pulse here, with a clear tectonic association, albeit an unknown one, was a big question. And so we went out there. The kind of rocks we're dealing with here are granitic rocks. So this is lava that's cooled underground, and big slate and shale beds. So this is fine sediments that would have piled up on the margin of a continent. Similar rocks to what we get up in the northeast or down on the south coast.
Right.
Cool. So the way that we operate, so this area was mapped. See, it's a pretty big area. Was mapped over 2 years. The first year, my boss was working down here. I was working up here, and then in the second year, I filled in the gap. You're working in these tiny little teams. There's one geologist, one mountaineer. You're responsible for the science. He's responsible for the logistics and keeping the two of you alive. Bonus.
Nice to be able to shrug that responsibility off, isn't it?
This is yours. Appreciate it if you do it well.
Yeah. Nice, Bob.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
And you work your little spots. So you've gone out there, as you'll see, with a couple of doos and a couple of skidoos, snowmobiles, and you'll base yourself on a little tent. You'll tell your pilot where you want to be dropped off, and you'll work between there. You'll work this area, and then when you're done, you'll up camp, move on to the next spot, work that area, and you'll up camp and do the same. And so you end up with this little line of campsites and a little line of field mapping through your area. So this is from this 15-16 season. So first things first, we've got to get to Antarctica in the first place. So back in the very distant past, when planes were still moving, we would arrive there by flying down to Chile, or just on commercial flights. You arrive down in the far south of Chile, which is about when you realise just how long that country is. And you get in these little this little Dash 7 people carrier. This is very much the air bridge. Whilst most of the equipment gets to Antarctica aboard ships, the scientists and the smaller scientific equipment will be flown down. This is the first thing you see as you come into. See this plane? And that puts you here into Rothera. So this is the main British base. Plenty of science happens here, but it's also the main port of call. As you can see, this big old runway laps across the middle of it. This is very important, not just for us, but for many bases across Antarctica fly through here. We're very reliant on Canadian planes, and this is the route that gets them into Antarctica. And it is quite amazing, especially the first time you arrive and I flew in and there were just these low-level stratus clouds all over the Antarctic Peninsula. I didn't see anything until breaking through the clouds and coming through into this base in what you saw in that previous video.
Nice.
What we work on is largely inland, so this is also our chance to catch our zoological photographs to fill with our Instagram and our future Christmas cards. This is a fur seal. These are proper gobby little animals. It's like living in an area covered in rabid dogs. They really don't like you.
Right.
Unlike other seals, they almost have arms. Their front flippers are so long that they can run at you at a good pace.
Right.
So you get these photos and then you get
And
out.
then you run.
These are elephant seals. So at the time you come through, most of these animals follow the retreat of the ice pack. These are the young males. About this time in the season, just like young deer, they constantly scrapping with each other, not just whispering into its little ear there, something shocking clearly.
Yeah.
But they also are a bit of a trouble. These are massive beasts, length of a car, and they'll shuffle themselves around, snorting and farting all over the base. And they plonk themselves in annoying locations. They could lie on the ice, but you've come along and dumped a load of tarmac and gravel, so they'd much rather sit on all of this nice warm sun-bleached ground, particularly here beneath a nice heat-generating building that might also be your sewage treatment plant.
Nice. Discerning connoisseurs.
Love it. And of course, these little chaps can't do a talk on Antarctica without some penguins.
Yeah.
And little Idalies. They are funny little buggers. And whilst there is rules about, people are meant to stay away from them, no one told them. They're very inquisitive. I don't think they quite understand what we are. There are no predators on land in Antarctica. So whilst in the water they may be hunted by seals and by whales, they're pretty confident little chaps. This one I particularly like. Most of the time you don't get these. Emperor penguins don't really base themselves around by Rothera. So it was a treat when this guy came up and a big huddle of people came out and were taking photos. But at some point people, start just chatting, and it just seemed to be, it just stepped back. I was like, we've got a penguin just hanging out in your social group.
Yeah, why not?
But once you've had your time doing your zooing, time to pack you up, get you off. So this is them carefully shuttling our two skidoos onto one of our little planes. So we saw the previous air bridge, the Dash 7. The Twin Otter is more like your old Land Rover of Antarctic vehicles. This is what you rely on to get dumped out into the ice. Pretty snug fit. It was our mechanic coming down with us to check that the equipment we left the previous year was still good to go.
Yeah.
And we came in and dumped off in the north end of the... This is when you know you're in the middle of the...
Yeah, right. Wow.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And yeah, now they'll dump you off, and this is you. I say some years you might get a depot dropped off or a resupply. Other years, this year actually we didn't. They left a depot as they flew off, and we didn't see anyone again for almost 3 months. But you pitch yourself up in this little camp, all set up in a line, so if the weather comes in, you can still find your stuff. This is your shelter, both you and your newly met mate. Are going to be based in here. This is your toilet tent. I've been told this is a bit of a posh softy thing these days that we're allowed tents for the toilet.
Yeah, now you've discovered Henderson's relish, mate. You won't be having that next time.
The stronger northern is just going to harden it up.
You're going to hole.
So leave that down jacket at home. And then down here's our kit, our sleds and our dues. You arrive, pitch up your tent, and then this is your home. So I'm sure back in the days they didn't, I don't imagine Scott of the Antarctic quite had this, but there's a good stash of, I'm sure, legally copied movies down there.
All legit.
Totally legit. And it's set up. But otherwise, the Tilly lamp, the Optimus stove, there's a museum in Cambridge, the Scott Polar Museum, and the kit is uncanny. The tent, the stoves, the light, it's very much if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is not a lightweight camping setup.
Yeah.
But you also know sheepskin rugs, very nice. Food's an interesting one. Definitely not a comfort food. This was the mountaineer I was working with, Casper, cooking up some cheese on toast. Did you know that cheese comes in a can?
Really?
It shouldn't.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, but
Moving on.
when you're down there and you've been stuck in the middle of nowhere and you're having long days and it's cold, your body just craves fat and salt. And so I started idolising this canned cheese. I would look forward to days where we were stuck in the tent with bad weather so that I could have my canned cheese.
Just good canned cheese.
Oh man, it was so good. And then at the end of it, I was like, this is so good. I'm going to fly a can home with me.
Yeah.
And I'll have it with the parents. It'll be like a little thing.
Yeah.
We opened the can and put it straight in the bin.
Yeah, I realised it wasn't so good.
It was grim. It was funky. They've been in a tent with two people who haven't washed for 3 months. Funky cheese, probably.
Yeah, right.
But on nice days as well, you can chill out. Here's a bit of sauce. Anyone can spot that? Good old
nice.
Honey. And then, yeah, you get out and try and get to your rock. So the multi-stage, the big issue here is you don't really want to fall down any holes. So you travel in these linked skidoos. So his skidoo is my skidoo, linked by a rope and a sled. So the idea is if he fell down a hole, this would cantilever and protect him. But you still don't want to get too close to these. It's a bit like watching a river. The water's dead calm until it goes past a rock and a piece of turbulence. And the same thing's happening with ice. All of this area around here is where the cracks are. So you ditch the skidoos, get on your skis, and softly ski your way up and try and get as high up the hill as you can before you go full-on mountaineer. And this is definitely the bit where the geologists feel smug, because whilst the glaciologists will just sit out there on the flat, we have a prerogative to go and climb mountains. The rocks are only exposed on the top, and that's grand.
And you reap the benefits.
Reap the benefits of that one. It's hard. That's the unfortunate bit.
Yeah.
But it is grand. And then eventually you get some rocks, and you get to spend far too long just staring at the ground, collecting the samples, finding what's there, and trying to make peace and sense of what you're finding on one hill against another across hundreds of kilometres. Sometimes you find, this was something fun last time, fossils. I mean, we all know that Antarctica used to be tropical, but it still comes as quite a surprise when you see these are pieces of bark from a tropical forest.
Wow.
In shallow marine, slightly offshore sediments. These wouldn't have travelled very far. And it's one of those funny things. You can know it, but when you see evidence for it, it is boggling.
Yeah. You still get the hairs on the back of your neck. Yeah.
And obviously sometimes the rocks aren't in the easiest of spots. But to be honest, most just looks like this. It's just great having videos. This is geological fieldwork.
Meanwhile, your mountaineer has a lot of time on his hands while you're inspecting those sweet, sweet rocks.
Oh man, yeah. Part of his job.
So you'll end up lugging kilos and kilos of rocks around the place.
We ended up flying about half a ton back. Yeah.
Wow.
So we let multiple flights. I mean, what tends to work out is the amount of fuel we use kind of balances out. In fact, there are fuel and food, but it's a huge amount. The issue is if you're going somewhere, you're unlikely anyone's going to go back. And so you need to collect enough sample to do the research that you're after, but also any future research.
Right.
You need to make sure that if you come back and if you came back and used all of that sample, if anyone else wanted to do follow-up research, they would need to mount an entire extra expedition.
Yeah.
Whereas BAS actually, and this is something that's quite incredible, especially if you've worked anywhere else, is the archive at BAS. I say BAS a lot, British Antarctic Survey, BAS. It is amazing. I mean, you can go and you can collect samples right back to the days of Scott. They've got numbers and locations of every rock.
Wow.
It is quite something.
Yeah, that's cool.
Whereas I imagine the back of any university is just an unnamed rockery.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, whilst I'm out there fanning around, the mountaineer has a lot of time on their hands. So the next pictures are just things of Casper filling his time. Here's Casper doing some yoga. Casper making stone circles. I just come back. I'll be doing my fieldwork, and I just turn around. I look at my rocks, get my records. I turn around. What are you doing?
Meditating, yeah. What?
This one, maybe Amazon would sponsor us if we got a shot with his Kindle.
Right, nice.
But most of the time, just you have to be you have to have very good temperament, I think, to do that work. Very intense, you've got it's very lot of responsibility to look after and run the logistical and safety side, and then huge amounts of time just sitting there while your scientist messes about.
Yeah.
But yeah, he clearly had a good time.
Nice.
And it was, it's very important. When someone says to you that you're going to spend 3 months in Antarctica, the person you're going to work with you've not met until you get there. It's not the field work that's most intimidating. I don't know who I would go on holiday with for 3 months. So it is quite something. But you get down there and you meet these amazing people and you have a great time.
Cool.
You have to both be pretty sharp. And some of the days are massive. This was the end. I think this was about 3 a.m. we came back this day. The mountain was just an absolute beast, and we knew that we could do it over 2 days, and we'd have to do the ascent twice, or we could just do one absolute whopper. But yes, the sun doesn't quite set. But then when you're done, pack up camp, create this bigger caravan, 3 sleds, 2 skidoos, and head on to your next spot. And make sure you don't go around any of these. This is the big hazard. Working in other parts of the world, the hazards are often animals, the locals, the roads. So we don't have any of these. But we do have big old holes sitting in the ice waiting to catch you out, which is why we're travelling roped up. And every now and then you fall through into one. This one kind of caught me up. I think it surprised Dave as well, but being a hardy mountaineer, got out as if nothing had happened. Tough Cumbrians. But yeah, sometimes it gets to the state. These crevasses at the back, this is a convergence of multiple crevasses coming into the end and a big bottleneck. You could drop a house down some of these holes.
Wow.
Go near it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other hazard is the weather. Some days it's a bit breezy. Ideal if you're hoping to take your notebook back with you, which after 3 months of recording is probably your most valuable item.
Yeah.
And some days you are definitely stuck. This is a full-blown blizzard running through the camp.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere until that leaves. And when it does leave, you have to hope that the snow goes with it. So this was after about a week of that.
Wow.
And we couldn't move. We tried moving. The skidoos couldn't pull through it. We had to wait for another week for this snow to blow off. Fortunately, because it's so cold, it never really solidifies. So you end up with this layer of soft powder just sitting on top of ice.
Yeah.
And so if you get some good breezes through it, will clear up. But we were pretty stuck.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you have to have things to do. I find knitting is a grand way of passing time in Antarctica. It turns out it's actually quite a big thing. I didn't know how to knit before, but I had a lot of time on my hands.
Nice.
I was a little bit better at learning new skills then than I am in this lockdown. Went back, made sure I got some more Christmas cards sorted out. It's Christmas because he's got a hat.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's literally just another day.
But it'll do, right?
It'll do. It's the little things. The little things. And this was New Year. Again, food, like ever, is always very important, and good sauce. Now Casper was quite a chef, so this is a haggis he managed to acquire for New Year, and a little whiskey sauce with some good Auchentoshan.
That's almost civilized, mate.
Oh, mate, it's living the dream. Look at that sunshine. Oh, so good. And then at the end, you hope they send you a plane and pick you up and take you back to normality. About as tight a fit as when I normally go on holiday. So yeah, thank you very much.
Nice one. Well, cheers, Alex. Let's get you to unshare your screen. Okay, so thanks very much for that. It was really cool talk. Thanks for the insight. I suppose, you look quite hands-on with the sweet rocks. Given the choice, would you take sort of the relative comfort of the ship, or would you prefer to be on land?
Oh, definitely on land. I mean, it's a gem to do both, and I have gone out my way to, like, when the opportunity came up to go to sea. But man, you've got to be good with the cabin fever to do that.
Right. Is that because it's a genuine, like, when you're in land, there's a genuine hands-on experience with the geology and the science, or is it that the ship is more uncomfortable, or it's more cabin fever, as you say?
The ships are comfortable. They're good ships. They're grand people on them. The chefs are great, and you're seeing amazing wildlife. I mean, this is the thing, like, you're stuck in the middle. You don't really see anything. The number of photos I get from my marine seasons are double what I get on land.
Right.
We're seeing whales come through and all this.
Wow, yeah.
But you are in a little confined space with all these little people for a long period of time, and if you're good at that, good on you.
Cool.
It's a lot easier if I can keep on moving.
Yeah, totally. What I would say to Quantum Source audience is, if you've got any other questions for Alex, then stick them on the Quantum Source Twitter account. Alex is also on Twitter. He'll have eyes on them, so we can have a chat about anything you want to put to him. But with that, Alex, I guess we'll leave you to your sources, and we'll say thanks very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Cool. Absolutely. See you around, mate.
Have fun.
Bye.
Bye.
So an awesome Antarctic adventure from Alex there, and we wish him luck and hope it's not too long before he can get back in close contact with those sweet rocks. Now then, if you enjoyed that, do keep your eyes peeled for more Quantum Sources, which we'll be announcing on the Quantum Source Twitter and Instagram feeds. And it just remains for me to say I've been Dr. Adam Booth, this has been Quantum Source, you've been great, stay cool.